Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of our What If series. So today is one for all you Deep Purple fans and for all you Paul Rodgers fans. So the kind of what if scenario, this has been asked for many times by quite a few of our viewers. What if in 1973 Ritchie Blackmore got his wish to have Paul Rodgers become the brand new singer for Deep Purple, replacing Ian Gillan? Okay, because that was Ritchie's number one target on his wish list. Okay, he had wanted, at the time, Deep Purple were once again, kind of a little bit in transition. You had the issues between Ritchie and Ian Gillan. Okay, I think Ritchie had, all right, we did the kind of sledgehammer hard rock music that I really wanted to move towards, but now Ritchie is starting to get, have an interest in other types of music, all right, and bluesier music, more kind of medieval sounds and things like that. So he wanted now less of a screamer, someone with a more soulful bluesy voice. Okay, his number one choice on his wish list was Paul Rodgers from Free. Okay, as it turned out, of course, who they wound up getting in the band were two guys to take on lead vocals. You had a virtual unknown in David Coverdale and a bass player / singer from a fairly popular but still, second tier band, Trapeze. All right, but his number one guy that he really wanted was Paul Rodgers. So let's look at the scenario. So at the time, so we're looking at 1973, Free as a band, Paul Rodgers, Andy Fraser, okay, Paul Kossoff and company, they basically done as a band. Okay, Rodgers is doing a couple different little projects and things like that, nothing really solidifying, but the seeds for Bad Company are starting to happen right around this time. So there's a lot happening. Gillan leaves Purple, Rodgers starting to talk about what would be the formation of Bad Company. Okay, Ritchie wants Paul. So Paul, my guess, again, how many of these, if any discussions happen, were there any discussions? Did Paul kind of hear about it from management or other people saying, oh, Blackmore wants you as the next singer in Deep Purple. Are you interested? Well, I mean, it's obviously not Paul's band. Deep Purple were not Paul's band. So he'd be jumping into a band that already has a significant history. All right. When in fact he's already got the seeds of this new band, this new vision, Bad Company, with Swan Song Records kind of already out there, right? So obviously that did not happen. But let's do the scenario. So what if Paul Rodgers, let's say that there was no Bad Company brewing yet. Paul Rodgers, still a pretty young singer, but a very known commodity from his time in Free. What if the pull of joining a mega band, and let's face it, Deep Purple were a mega band at the time, what if the pull was just too great? Okay? What if also, because Purple needed a bass player because Roger Glover was out as well, what if both Paul Rodgers and Andy Fraser were convinced to go and join Deep Purple rather than join up with Boz Burrell and Simon Kirke in Bad Company? So what if there was no Bad Company and the new lineup of Deep Purple was Ian Pace, John Lord, Ritchie Blackmore, Paul Rodgers, and Andy Fraser? How kind of ridiculous, or ridiculously good, I should say, does that sound? So that is a supergroup to end all supergroups, right? So that means that David Coverdale perhaps never gets discovered. Okay? Perhaps then there is never a Whitesnake. Perhaps Glenn Hughes stays in Trapeze, and Trapeze becomes the huge band that they probably should have. Because that's a whole other part of this what-if scenario. Because I personally think that Trapeze were this close to being a breakout band. Because those two rockin' albums, Medusa, You Are the Music, We're Just the Band, those are some great albums that I think we're seeing the trajectory of Trapeze as a band that perhaps with another really solid studio album like those two could have propelled them to the big time. They had all the tools. Glenn coming into his own as a vocalist, great bass player. Mel Galley, killer guitar player. Okay? That duo right at the top, Dave Holland on drums. That was a rockin' band. So Hughes doesn't join Purple, Trapeze becomes huge. Okay? Coverdale doesn't join Deep Purple, perhaps toils in obscurity his whole career. I still think that David Coverdale always had the talent. He would have made something happen. But without that experience in Deep Purple, even if he had gone solo and put together a band, would it have sounded like Whitesnake? We don't know, because Coverdale has said many times that he learned so much musically from being in Deep Purple alongside John Lord and Ritchie Blackmore and Ian Pace and that whole crew. He learned so much that helped shape his musical career. But had he not joined Purple, where would that career have been? Would there have been a Whitesnake? We have no way of knowing. No way of knowing. But let's go back to Purple now. So now you've got Rodgers and Fraser in Deep Purple. Is there a Burn album? Or is there something similar? Because you have to think, we already knew the direction that Rodgers and Fraser would go. Well, specifically the direction that Rodgers went with Bad Company, which not that similar from the direction that Blackmore eventually wanted to take Rainbow just a few years later. Okay? Maybe not at the time, but you look at like late 70s, early 80s Rainbow, I think Ritchie had tired of the kind of, heavy rock, early metal, kind of progressive medieval sounding, heavy music that he was doing with Ronnie Dio and then to a lesser extent with Graham Bonnet. But he got Joel and Turner in the band because he wanted to kind of do his own version of like Bad Company or Foreigner. All right, a more accessible sound with that bluesy singer, out front who had that really appealing voice that could satisfy and do pop and rock and blues rock and all that sort of thing. So wouldn't it have been interesting if Ritchie and Deep Purple and company with Paul Rodgers in tow and with Andy Fraser's great, songwriting capabilities and great bass playing and backing vocals, they could have started to do that a little bit earlier. So would like the Burn era stuff, would that have sounded completely different? Would you have this meeting of Purple and Bad Company and Free, right? How much different would those albums have been? And would it have lasted? Okay? Could you just imagine, and here another part of this whole thing, Ritchie, throughout his career, never got along with a really strong personality behind the microphone for too long. Look at his career. Ian Gillan, a very strong personality. That never clicked, okay? Ronnie James Dio, that didn't last too long either. Graham Bonnet. I think Joel and Turner was a little bit less in that area, right? Okay, Ritchie kind of likes singers who do exactly what he wants them to do. And you really think Paul Rodgers is going to do that back in the day? I would have loved to have heard it. I would have loved to have heard just one album with that configuration. Lord, Pace, Blackmore, Rodgers, and Fraser. And I would love to go back in time and have them agree to do that, whether it lasts for an album or lasts for 10 years. How cool would that have been to hear those pipes of doom from Rodgers alongside Blackmore and company? Kind of cool to think about, right? Obviously it didn't happen, but that was, Ritchie wanted Paul Rodgers, and who wouldn't have, right? One of the greatest rock singers of our time, alongside one of the greatest guitar players and one of the greatest bands of all time, right? As it turns out, it didn't turn out too bad for everybody involved, so, right, but we're just talking here, because obviously, Deep Purple did very, very well for themselves with the, the Mark III lineup on Burn and Stormbringer. That's as long as that lasted. Bad Company had a little bit of a longer run with their classic lineup, right? Did a bunch of really good albums, okay? But it's kind of cool to think about how it would have been had the axis of the universe changed a little bit differently, and Paul Rodgers said, yeah, you know what? This could work, because I'm going to make a lot of money doing this. This band is on fire. I can instantly jump in. I'll learn how to sing the old songs, and we'll do a lot, and we're ready to do a new album. How Rodgers would sound singing Highway Star, and Smoke on the Water, and, all those classics, Space Truckin' and whatever. That's debatable, right? Because if you look back, Paul and Coverdale at that young age weren't that far removed from each other. They both had that kind of soulful, bluesy voice. Coverdale was never great singing those early, Purple classics that were originally sung by Ian Gillan. Would Rodgers have fared any better? I mean, we learned later on, he kind of stepped in and worked with the guys from Queen. And while he was no Freddie Mercury, obviously just so different, I thought he did an admirable job singing all those Queen classics. I thought it is different, but it wasn't terrible, right? Quite frankly, I've heard a lot of live recordings from the Mark III version of Deep Purple tackling Mark II versions with Coverdale and Hughes trying to do the Ian Gillan stuff. Not always great, okay? They gave it their go, but no one replaces Ian Gillan. Nobody sounds like Ian Gillan. It's kind of similar with Freddie Mercury, but I think that they tried to do Ian screaming stuff, whereas Paul didn't really try to sound like Freddie at all. He was just singing these songs as Paul Rodgers would. So it kind of, for me, if you compare the two, that was a little more successful. But, thankfully, the Mark III version of Deep Purple did not do a ton of Mark II songs. Okay, they did Highway Star and Smoke on the Water, obviously, and maybe a couple in Space Truck, and not much more. Okay, they kind of kept it at a minimum. Of course, this was an era where, you had 18, 20, 25-minute long songs with plenty of jamming, so you can go out and play an hour and a half set and really only do like 8 tunes, right? That was the 70s. So, but anyway, kind of cool to discuss. Curious to see what you guys think. Would it have worked if Paul Rodgers and Andy Fraser joined Deep Purple instead of Coverdale and Hughes? Right? Didn't happen, of course, but kind of cool to ponder. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on the mighty YouTube each and every day. Got all sorts of great stuff coming up. Man, Jeff Young himself is going to be in the studio. We are going to be doing a couple of classic live album wars. We got more coming up with Chris Allo, all sorts of other stuff. I'll be out for a couple days this week, so you probably will see me after tomorrow, early morning. You probably won't see any content. I'll load up as much as I can, but then I'll be back Wednesday morning, and we'll get started with some other stuff for the rest of the weekend and next weekend. I don't know if I'm going to get to a questions and answers this weekend, guys, so they may have to wait till next weekend. We'll see how the day goes. But anyway, lots of good stuff coming, so stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. Tell your friends, subscribe, and enjoy all the upcoming content we've got. And make sure you check out our playlist. All right? I get questions every day from people. Pete, have you ever done a show on this? Pete, when are you going to do a show on this? It's like, we've done it. Go to the playlist. I go to great lengths to organize all the content in the playlist. So if you want to know if I've done a classic album war before, go to the playlist. If you want to know if I've done a top 10 song show on a certain band, go to the top 10 song playlist. There's all sorts of great stuff in there. Remember, we're celebrating this month 5 years on YouTube. We've got hundreds of videos, hundreds. So much stuff. So that's the best way to find things. Go back in time. Go look at stuff that we did 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. The content's better now, obviously. I look back at some of those year one videos, and I'm like, ugh, man, I was just kind of still figuring things out. But we're on a roll now. And thank you for all of your views and all of your subscriptions. We're taking this thing to the top. So hope you all stay along for the ride. We'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.